You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove. For all the latest Buckeyes news, analysis, reaction, and the best Ohio State community on the entire internet, head over to buckeyegrove.com or follow us on Twitter at Ohio State Rivals. Without any further delay, it's time to get unscripted, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Mom! We get some meatloaf!
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Mom! The meatloaf!
Good Monday. Welcome to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, presented by BuckeyeGrove.com. Sailing away on our maiden voyage for the first time, I am your host, Kyle Lamb, and I am with publisher Kevin Noon. Kevin, it is a pleasure to be with you on this first voyage. I don't foresee any ice fields in our future, so we should have a successful voyage. I don't think we're going to sink to the bottom like the Titanic did.
Yeah, as long as it's not a 3-hour tour, but then again, I wouldn't mind being stuck on an island with Marianne and or Ginger, to be honest.
Well, I'm not quite as good looking, so you'd be stuck with me instead. So I don't think that's a win-win for you.
No, but, let's hopefully, we navigate the ocean on this, and, this is the first of many great podcasts, and I can't tell you how excited I am that we've finally been able to get this up off the ground and, to future successes.
I'm going to dub this first episode The Force Awakens. I love finding literary and film titles to relate to certain shows. So it seems like maybe a little vain to say, but I'm hoping this will be a force. I think this will be a great production. It was great when we started conceptualizing this, because I think with your radio background and my radio background, we kind of share the same geeky things as far as interest in putting this thing together. So I hope people will appreciate the production value as well as the professionalism or lack thereof at times. But it seems like a match made in heaven as far as putting this thing together.
Yeah, and it's a great opportunity for us to be able to reach out and spread the message of Buckeye Grove. We've got such a great staff here with you as an addition, and to be able to get that news out there and hopefully get more people in the fray over in the Horseshoe Lounge. But yeah, I definitely think that our backgrounds being in the production side the way that we have, really lends itself to us looking to continually make this product better and better. And I think we're getting off to a great start here in episode 1. So, hopefully we don't go downhill the way that the Star Wars series has once you get into some of these later films.
Oh, you just upset a whole group of Star Wars fans out there. So I want to ask you, so obviously we're going to talk some Ohio State today. We'll talk a little football, a little basketball, and Marc Givler is going to be by for our first, what we hope will be a long in the series of recruiting roundups, and we're going to get into the Friday Night Lights stuff. There's a lot of stuff to talk about from the weekend, a whole lot of offers going out, some surprise visits, so we'll get in all of that later when Marc joins me, and we'll talk some recruiting. And like I said, obviously this is an Ohio State themed show, but we'll get into some Ohio sports over the course of the next several weeks and months as well, so it's not going to be just Ohio State. Hopefully we can tickle your fancy with Ohio pro sports as well. But Kevin, I want to ask you, so when you visualize this podcast, I want you to just tell the listeners what you hope to accomplish with this and where you see the podcast going, hopefully, and over the course of months and hopefully years.
Well, I as I kind of had said, I think it's just a good way to get the message out. I think a lot of people are aware of Buckeye Grove, maybe have not given it a try, but here with the podcast, being able to listen to it, I think that they should be able to get an idea of who some of the personalities on our staff are, and we certainly have some personalities on our staff. But you hit the nail right on the head in terms of it's just not going to be 100% strictly Ohio State. I think you'll have those Ohio sports in there. I won't be any help on those. I'm not really a fan of any Ohio professional team just because I've lived everywhere in the country. I think there might be some current event pop culture type stuff in there too. I think it's just going to be a good chance to have to have some fun, and I think we'll open it up to taking some listener feedback and have some back and forth there too. The sky is really the limit with this. I think that there's just so many things there, and we may try something out and it'll work. We may try something else out and it may not work. That's the nice thing about this. It can constantly evolve, and I think that when we go back in a year from today and we do our first year show, we can go back and listen to the first show, and we'll be like, wow, we've come a long way. But I think we're going to be starting off on a strong foot to begin with.
So, as always, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, you're more than welcome to hit us up. Of course, you can catch us on BuckeyeGrove.com all the time. You can catch me on Twitter at KYLam8. Catch Kevin at Kevin_noon. And, if you have any suggestions, if you have any questions about the podcast, the direction it's going to go, feel free to hit us up. We'd love to hear your feedback on this. Many people have already asked, who's going to be on the podcast. Of course, we're going to have Marc coming up later in the show today. He's going to be on with a weekly recruiting roundup, or quasi-weekly, maybe not every week, but we're going to have Ross on, especially as football season nears. We're going to talk some X's O's with him. Of course, Nevada Buck will be on. We plan on utilizing the entire staff, so trust us. We're going to get everybody involved, and we hope to have a lot of different opinions, a lot of different insights, perspectives. It's going to be a lot of fun, and of course, it's not going to be just limited to the Buckeye Grove staff either. I fully intend to have some national guests. We hope to get some national football, national basketball recruiting analysts on. We'll talk some various beat writers for the national gigs. So we got a lot of plans for this show, and some of them will evolve, and some of them we've already got in our heads and how it's going to work out. But we're very excited about this. So. Kevin, summer is obviously a slow time, and we're going to talk some recruiting, but, I'm kind of curious where you see the Ohio State football season going. It's kind of interesting. We've seen some of the early spreads come out, and Ohio State, I think, a 2.5-point favorite at Penn State. I'm just kind of curious your take as we head into football season, what you expect from this Big Ten, which on paper seems pretty loaded this year.
Yeah, I think expectations are just kind of difficult to even really, wrap your head around, because, first and foremost, if you talk to an Ohio State fan, it's win them all or bust in any year. And this year they have so much talent coming back, but they certainly have some questions at certain positions. And having that Penn State game at the end of September, that's good news, bad news. It's good news in the way that Penn State isn't going to have an opportunity to really figure out some of their stuff yet, but maybe Ohio State, that's going to truly be their first test. I guess you can sit there and say the trip to Dallas and Jerry World to take on TCU, but I think that the expectations for Ohio State are going to be for a very good season. I think that the win total over under was 9.5, something like that. It almost seems kind of like a fool's bet. And then, of course, you're always like, well, Vegas always knows. But, I think it's going to do better than that. I think Ohio State is probably, on top of the heap in the Big Ten East, and by virtue of that, on top of the heap in the Big Ten, and definitely a team that's right there for the college football playoff discussion. And I think a lot of it is going to ride on first year signal caller Dwayne Haskins and what he's going to be able to do. But more importantly than that, what line going to do? Urban Meyer has said time and time again, this is an offensive line driven team. You don't sit there and lose a guy like Billy Price and a guy like Jamarco Jones and say, well, all is well. We're just gonna plug in at this point. So how quick are guys going to be able to get there? Is Isaiah Prince going to be able to step up and continue his growth? Is Thayer Munford going to be able to come in there and be thrown in the fire, especially if he's at the left tackle position and Isaiah Prince is at the right tackle position? Who's going to be the center? Is it going to be Brady Taylor? Are we going to see a shift that's going to happen and where they're going to be trying to fit people in the right spots? I could go on, but I need to come up for air for a second. It's going to be a very exciting season. I think we're going to have a lot to talk about over the next 60-some days before kickoff against Oregon State.
Yeah, I've been asking myself, I wonder if I really am curious how the Big Ten is going to shape up, because the Big Ten East, especially on paper, I think going into the season is probably going to be the country's strongest division. At least you would think so. There seems to be 4 legitimate top 10 Big Ten championship caliber teams in that Eastern Division with Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan State. But of course, there could be a possibility of these teams beating each other up this year. I know with Michigan especially, it's going to be interesting because they're going to have all kinds of experience coming back, and their expectations could be sky high. I know some people are going to be in show-me mode until it's actually proven on the field with Jim Harbaugh, but they certainly have talent there. But like Ohio State and some other teams, but especially Michigan more than anybody, they've got a just loaded schedule this year. So even if you see Michigan as a top 10 team, it's very conceivable you could expect them to lose 2, 3, maybe even 4 games despite their talent.
Well, right. And, I think you could put me in that show me category as well, that I need to see a little bit more there. I mean, they're bringing in a guy with Shea Patterson, who within the Ole Miss offense was able to do a lot of things, but let's see what he's able to do in the Michigan offense. Let's see what Ed Warner means to that offensive line there. And we're going to sit there, excuse me, we're going to look at their running backs, and we're going to say, where's that yardage going to come from? Is it going to be Karan Higdon? Is it going to be Chris Evans? They've had injured where Tariq Black was hurt. Is he going to be able to step up? Where's the progression going to be there for Donovan Peoples-Jones? There definitely are a lot of questions on offense. On that defense, they've got some dudes. I mean, I know that Ohio State fans don't want to hear anybody talking positive about their biggest rival on defense, but I think they're going to go as far as that offense takes them. And there are a lot of questions, and until they can get over the hump against some of their rivals, I'm going to be a little skeptical.
Are you buying or selling on Michigan State with Brian Lewerke? He put up great numbers last year, but there are a lot of people, I think myself included, that are a little skeptical. I think Michigan State's offense was much improved. Their defense wasn't up to Michigan State typical standards last year, but in a weird sort of way, I kind of trust their defense a little bit more than I trust their offense. Where do you sit in that boat?
I think that's the team that I know the least about. I've read my Phil Steele magazine. I've looked at all these things, and it all makes sense to a certain extent, but I guess I kind of just need to see what they're going to be able to do. I mean, they've come a long way from their, a couple of years ago when they won 2 or 3 games or whatever. They've again, I'm not to go back and use the same terminology. They've got some due too, but I think of the 4 teams in the Big Ten East that we're talking about being there vying for being the team to go to Indianapolis. Michigan State's the one I trust the least.
So overall, I want to, we got a lot of time to talk about the Dwayne Haskins quarterback situation and what will he do as a starting quarterback at Ohio State. But I'm kind of interested because, Ohio State is going to go into the, first game of the season against an Oregon State team that, on paper, not very good last year. And I think a lot of people are expecting a cakewalk, but it's going to be an interesting game for Dwayne Haskins to play against because you're still talking about a power conference team. And I kind of wonder, everybody's got their sights set on the TCU game a couple weeks later, but it'll be interesting because this is a game I think Ohio State fans should not overlook. And just because you're talking about breaking in a new starting quarterback, I don't want to say I would be concerned about it, but it's just interesting how I think fans should maybe not overlook this Oregon State game. It could be, I think, a tricky game that may be closer than the pundits expect it to be.
Well, I think if we get to that type of point, it's going to be because Ohio State wins it 24-0, rather than I think that there's a greater chance that could happen than Ohio State just blasts them and puts up 77 points in that game. But Oregon State is probably one of the worst P5 teams, and they've had to go through some wholesale changes. And maybe I'm too close to the situation at times that I've allowed myself to taste the Kool-Aid a little bit. But I see that game being kind of a bloodbath, to be quite honest. I don't know if I don't think Ohio State's going to get up into the 50s or 60s, but I think Ohio State could definitely get up into the 40s in that type of game, just by lining up and running the ball down their throats. I mean, Ohio State's going to need to get out there and show some things in the passing game. They're going to put some stuff on tape for teams to prepare for because, truthfully, until they do that, teams are going to load up and put 8-9 in the box and just, say, all right, beat us downfield. Let's not sell short what J.T. Barrett's pocket awareness was. He was able to prolong plays. He was able to tuck it and run. And that's not necessarily Haskins' game. He's not exactly a mobile, but he's not going to get out there and remind anybody of one of Ohio State's more mobile quarterbacks either. So, I don't know. I think that if I were going to circle a game that meant more in terms of being mindful before the TCU game, it would probably be Rutgers week 2, just because of the sheer fact that you have Chris Ash there, who was a coach at Ohio State. They're preparing for Ohio State every year, being fellow Big Ten East Conference foes. I think that one would pose a little bit more concern to me than that opener against Oregon State because I don't think Oregon State finishes in the top 3 in the MAC, to be quite honest.
It will be interesting to see how the Ohio State coaching staff approaches it too, from a strategy standpoint. Are they going to come out aggressive right away with Dwayne Haskins? I think it'll tell us a little bit about how they feel about him early on to see how aggressive and how much how often they go to the air. I think regardless of the circumstances, Urban would always say he wants that 50-50 pass-run balance. But I think within the context of the number of times they pass, we could also get an idea of how much he trusts Haskins out of the chute from the type of passes we see. Are we seeing just little, horizontal screen passes? Or are we seeing the vertical passing game and go downfield? And that'll be really interesting for me the first couple of weeks to see how they approach that with him.
I think more of the telling story will be the first time that they're down and what the offense ends up doing at that point. Because I think that against an Oregon State and even against a Rutgers, and God bless you, Chris Ash, you're trying, but you don't really have the horses over there yet. I mean, even if Dwayne Haskins will throw some interceptions. He is a gunslinger. He's going to take his chances. He's going to throw some passes that are just going to be remarkable, and he's going to thread the needle and make throws that we would have never seen 16 attempt last year. But when you do that, you're going to throw some interceptions too. You just have to have a short memory out there, get out there, learn from the mistake, and not make that same mistake again. I think it's when Ohio State, and I think we could potentially see that against TCU. If TCU gets up at that point, where are they going to go? Are they going to go to the safety net of the running game? When you have a 1-2 punch of J.K. Dobbins and Mike Weber, it's really easy to sit there and shrink the playbook to a cocktail napkin and just run behind a big offensive line and take your chances there. I mean, so at that point, I think is when we're really going to know more about what the coaches think about where Haskins is in terms of his development and his progression, and just really what they think of the passing game. And lastly on that, they're just going to be just a different type of offense because they're not going to have that zone read to be able to fall back on. I mean, obviously Dwayne Haskins has witnessed one of the best in terms of that type of offense in J.T. Barrett. He probably understands certain elements. I seem to remember sometimes against that team up north, up there in Ann Arbor in 2017 of where there was kind of a zone read type of offense still run with him. But I think a lot of that too was surely because they didn't want to open up the playbook too much and expose him to too much risk. But there's so much exciting stuff to see coming forward in terms of where they're going to be at, and these first 8 quarters of football are going to be very telling because it's going to be against 2 overmatched teams, and I think we're going to get a good idea of what things are going to look like moving forward based on that. Yeah,
that will be fascinating. He will be without that 3rd and 4 crutch that we've seen for the last 3 years. That zone read on 3rd and 4, you could pretty much count on it. But now, with 4 yards to go on a 3rd down or 4th down or whatever, you might actually have to throw the ball in a lot of cases, and it'll be interesting to see that. Kyle Lamb with Kevin Noon here. You can tweet at me at KYLam, 8. Tell me how you're feeling about the upcoming season. Are you excited? Do you have reservations about Dwayne Haskins? What are your expectations, your concerns for the season? Would love to hear you. Tweet at me and let me know what you're thinking. So, Kevin, I want to ask you about Ohio State basketball. The non-conference schedule was released. And this is kind of a two-way street here because on one hand, just from a sheer analytics standpoint, looking at Ohio State from a scheduling standpoint, this is a really tough, challenging schedule for the Buckeyes in 2018. They've got several high-profile games. They've got a couple really good road games at Cincinnati to open the season, at Creighton. Of course, you got UCLA on a neutral court site, and then you got Syracuse at home. The other flip of the coin here, though, is I hear a lot of Ohio State fans frustrated, of course, because there aren't really a lot of marquee games on the home schedule. You've got Syracuse, which may or may not be an NCAA tournament team, and after that, there are a couple decent mid-majors on there like Bucknell, but it really drops off. So from just a sheer basketball standpoint, it's a great schedule for Ohio State, but from a Ohio State fan's point of view, it may be a little bit of a disappointing schedule.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there definitely are those games that are either away or neutral sites that are going to be very challenging. And you're looking at a team that's replacing just so much with the loss of Keita Bates-Diop and Jayshawn Tate and Cam Williams and Andrew Dockich. Can't even believe that I'm saying that at this point. If you would have told me a little more than a year ago that he would have been in that same discussion thread, I would have just laughed at you. But they're losing so much, and they're bringing in some talented freshmen. They're bringing in a grad transferring in Keyshawn Woods. So I mean, I think that they need to have maybe some of those games that fans may just sit there and turn their nose up at home just to taste some early successes, because they will be challenged at other points. I mean, that's certainly gonna be the case. And maybe in the 1920 season, Chris Holtmann came in and said that he wanted to have challenging non-conference schedules, but he's also a realist too. And you're not going to sit there and just load up a schedule. I mean, you need to have the Gardner-Webbs, which is a former employer of his. You need to have the Gardner-Webbs of the world on that schedule at this point, because if you sit there and you're playing 12 tournament teams in the non-conference, I mean, you're setting yourself up to be kind of behind the eight ball when you look at the schedule for a team that really has to kind of find itself. Because I mean, what are they returning at this point? I mean, there's some pieces there. I mean, you've got the Wessons, and you've got Micah Potter, and you got Musa Jallo, and you got Kyle Young, but outside of that, it's a bunch of guys that have not played a single game in scarlet and gray at Value City Arena. So let's ramp it up a little bit before we sit there and start calling for it. And I mean, I'm going to call the fans out at this point. Show up. I think that the crowds at Value City Arena, when they're playing the Michigan States of the world, they're there and they're loud and they're doing their best at that point. But get there for that Gardner-Webb game. Get there for that Siena game or whoever. Just don't show up for the 2 or 3 national CBS type of games that occur on the schedule. Get there for everything else. Be loud. Make some noise. At that point, you have a little bit more of a home court advantage, and then we'll talk.
Yeah, and I should remind people, too, this is especially a really challenging schedule they've got. It may not be a great home schedule, but it's a challenging schedule, especially when you consider they're playing 20 Big Ten games this year. So the number of quality games that Ohio State is playing in this upcoming season is really impressive. It's funny, the biggest reaction I think people gave to the schedule come out was the return to St. John Arena, playing Cleveland State in late November at St. John. And it's amazing that 20 years later, after Value City Arena, Schottenstein Center has been built, there are still that many people that get excited to go back to St. John Arena because of the acoustics in there and the atmosphere it provides. And it's just, I completely understand why they did what they did, and Schottenstein Center has a lot of pluses to it. It's a great arena, but in terms of atmosphere, there's nothing like St. John Arena.
Right. When I was an undergrad at Ohio State, they played at St. John Arena. I remember that student tickets were split. It was split season because, well, one, there just wasn't a lot of student seating, and two, just the demand was so high. But I was there in the early 90s for the Jimmy Jackson, Chris Gent type teams or whatever, and the team was obviously very successful at that point. But you go into Value City Arena and it's just so cavernous at times. Even if you have 12,000 in there, I mean, if they're not all focusing their juju at the same direction at the same time, you're really not going to hear a lot. I mean, the sound dissipates so much there. I don't really have any great ideas of how to make it better, other than putting more rear ends in seats and saying cheer louder.
Yeah, when it comes right down to it, that's what's going to take. I mean, the Michigan State atmosphere, that was like you said, people show up for that. And it's like when you put 19,000 people in that building and they're screaming at the top of their lungs, it can still be loud. It can still be a great atmosphere. And that was that particular day. So it's not that it can't happen. Sure, the acoustics, and there are other factors that make it harder to compete, with some of the best atmospheres in college basketball, but it can still be a great place for a basketball game when crowds are into it, when you have a whiteout or a blackout or a scarlet out, whatever you want to have. Whatever the situation is, it can still be a great atmosphere. So Well, Kevin, I appreciate you joining me here on this first podcast as we get ready to bring in Marc Givler and get into some recruiting and Friday Night Lights. It's been a pleasure talking with you on this first podcast, and I am very much looking forward to many, many more after this.
Absolutely. I can't wait. This is going to be a great product. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. I may have to change that around, start listening to this one, even though I already know the best segment's the one that I'm in.
Kevin Noon. Catch him on Twitter at Kevin_Noon. And, of course, you can catch him every day as the publisher of Buckeye Grove. Thanks, Kevin.
It's time to go inside Ohio State recruiting and take a peek behind the scenes with Buckeye Grove recruiting guru Marc Givler and his magical orb of wonderment. They said it couldn't be done, but he's outdone himself once more. Back for another recruiting roundup.
That's what I do. I drink and I know things.
All right, Marc Givler is here now with our very first recruiting roundup. And Marc, that was a very nice introduction we got you there. Nice little bumper. That's probably the most love you've been shown in a long time, huh?
Yeah, I'm thrilled that we were able to get a Game of Thrones here going. So
I actually had Game of Thrones theme song. Side note, I had Game of Thrones theme song as a ringtone on my phone for a while. I really liked it. People thought it got annoying after a while, so I switched it. But I liked it. I was happy with it.
Yeah,
so,
it got a big boost of like mainstream popularity there. Now like, bands are playing it at games and everything. So
yeah, and there's
taken off. It's turning into one of those things though. It's almost too much now. Now people are getting tired of it.
There's the Game of Thrones experience. You can go down to, I think Ohio Theater actually had it. You can go down, or maybe it was Nationwide Arena. I know they had a concert there where you can they have a little thing on stage, and then there's the music playing with the orchestra, and I thought that's pretty cool. To me, I'm not a Game of Thrones nerd enough to go see something like that, but I thought that was pretty cool.
I'm down to pretty much take any Game of Thrones content. So
yeah. Well, we've got so long to wait until the next episode. So, we got another year before it comes out. So you got to get any kind of Game of Thrones content you can to hold yourself over. So, we've got Ohio State's got their own little Game of Thrones going here with recruiting. Let's start with the big news of the weekend. Friday Night Lights on Friday. We'll work starting with Sunday night and work our way back. Let's start with the topic du jour. Ohio State finally gets its guy, the quarterback commitment that they've been looking for, endlessly searching for who was going to be the 2019 commitment, and we found out Sunday afternoon on his own Twitter that Dwan Mathis, who made a surprise official visit to Ohio State this weekend, wound up committing to the Buckeyes, flipping from Michigan State. Let's start there, talk about his commitment and what Ohio State is getting with Mathis.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting road here. It was almost to the point where it became hard to report on because every time it looked like the sea was parting for one guy, something would happen and things would take a left turn and things would go in a different direction, and it just became so almost exhausting to try and report on it. But this was a guy that they really liked last year around this time. They didn't quite pull the trigger. They weren't quite ready to do that. Kept on him, kept watching him. Decided, obviously, this spring to go on the offer. And, it was just a matter of could they pry him from Michigan State. And they got him on campus after the Rivals camp when he was in Columbus in May. And it sounds like that set the foundation. Things got very quiet the last few weeks, but they got him in on the official, obviously, as we found out when he walked right outside of the Woody Hayes facility. It was he's a high upside guy in a class that does not have a lot of good quarterbacks nationally. It's a struggle to find a lot of good quarterbacks in this class. There's just not many guys that I would really put my stamp of approval on at this point. And so if you're gonna be wrong on talent, or if you're gonna miss on talent. And he has talent. He's got a big arm. He's 6'4". He's run some really good track times. Someone told me he's like a sub 1100 he put up earlier. So he's got the physical tools that Ohio State would want to run the offense. with the big body, the athleticism, and a good arm. And, nice kid. Teammates seem to really like him at Oak Park. They've been recruiting a few guys there over the years, specifically Justin Rogers in 2020 is a big one. But, again, I think in a class with so many limited options that you take a guy who has a pretty high ceiling and you roll the dice there. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there who I just, they're fine, they're solid, but they don't jump out at you physically or athletically. And then some of those guys they were recruiting earlier would fit in that mold for me. But this is a guy who does have considerable upside.
Yeah, you mentioned the endless parade of quarterbacks, and I want to ask you, because I remember a couple of months ago on my last stop, I was talking about this. It seemed like every week there was a new guy that, is this the guy that Ohio State is after? And, of course, they had their flirtation with Graham Mertz, and it looks like they were unable to flip him from Wisconsin. And there was a period of time where we thought Grant Gunnell was leaning towards Ohio State. And, there's just one guy after another. How much of it was maybe not having success and losing guys elsewhere, or how much of it was just Ohio State after a while just, maybe deciding that wasn't the guy that they wanted and finally, settling in on Dwan Mathis as the guy that, hey, we want this guy and let's make our final pitch to him?
Yeah, I mean, I think initially the top two guys were probably Bo Nix and Graham Mertz. And Nix was just never going to happen. Auburn legacy, lives in Alabama. That kid was born to play quarterback in the SEC. That it was never going to work. But was definitely a guy that I think they really liked. And then there was Mertz, who kind of gave the early commitment to Wisconsin. And they shook some confidence there with that commitment, but they were never quite able to turn the corner to the point where they got comfortable that this was really going to be a fit. Mertz reaffirmed to Wisconsin recently. Seems to not really be playing the game too much right now, and I think Ohio State made a calculated decision of keep at it with Mertz. Keep at it with Mathis, and then and see what happens with Brian Maurer when they bring him up. So it was kind of which domino would fall first. They were able to get Mathis in on the official and quickly flip him. So that's kind of where we're at. I think we talked. You threw out some other guys. At various points they just never could bring themselves to go all in. They couldn't do it for Grant Gunnell. They couldn't do it for Sam Howell. There were just certain guys that, they would dip the toe in the water, but they just couldn't take the plunge on certain guys. So it was kind of a combination of both. You have Mertz and Nix, who you just can't quite get the traction with. And then you have some other guys who maybe you like, but you don't love, and you don't want to take a guy you don't love a year before signing day, those guys are getting heard by other schools, so you can't blame those guys for going elsewhere and not waiting, for Ohio State to sort of make their call on going all in or not. So yeah, I mean, it was a roller coaster. I really thought it opened wide open for Gunnell there for a couple weeks, and then they just sort of pumped the brakes. I mean, we saw some of the coaches down in Texas, and so they were down there. I mean, they were down in Austin and Houston area, but they didn't go to Grant's high school that week, which was kind of telling to me, and that was sort of the beginning of the end for me in terms of starting to back off the Gunnell stuff, because it did look there for a while that was going to be the guy once some of the other options fell to the wayside. But
yeah, I may or may not have called Grant Gunnell to Ohio State at one point. I'm just going to be honest. I did. I actually thought that was going to happen, and then it just kind of went sour. It just vanished.
They brought him up on the official. It went well. The family loved it. Grant loved it. There was nobody left. Everyone else was committing somewhere else, and that looked like it was it. And then, for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And like I said, when we were down there in Texas, going to spring practices, and we knew they were down there that week, and we knew that they did not stop to see Grant. That was kind of the first sign to me. I was like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't going to happen. So it's crazy how it worked out. I think it worked out about as well as it could have, given what the options are out there. I haven't seen one kid in this class that I would call a 5-star quarterback. I think a guy like Mertz is a typical high 4-star guy. And just, in any class, he's probably one of the 8 to 10 best quarterbacks in the country. So he's one of those types of guys who any year is going to be a good get. But I don't see, a guy. I don't know if I see a guy in this class that would have been one of the top 5 or 6 quarterbacks last year. Now, last year was a great class, but it's tough sailing. And, like I said, Mathis, to me, the other guys, and I think you're bringing him in as a developmental guy. I don't think you're bringing him in as the franchise savior. I don't think he needs to go out there year 1 or 2 and lead the team. You have Haskins, you have Martell behind him, and you will soon have Baldwin at your disposal once the knee is healthy. So, to me, this is a good solution.
Well, you mentioned the buzzword I wanted to ask. I was going to segue into Brian Maurer, and you already mentioned him, which is good. It's like you're looking at my notes because we're already in sync here, episode 1. I like to jump in to the deep end right off the bat, and we're certainly there. Thank you for reading my mind on that. So where do you think Ohio State sits with Brian Maurer? I know you wrote about this. Will it affect him? That kind of implies that maybe Ohio State would consider still taking Maurer in this class. Do you think that's a possibility? And do you think Maurer is open to that as we sit here and talk about this coming out Monday? Do you think that will be a possibility? What's your read on that?
I think Ohio State would love to keep that thing going with him. But I don't think it's going to happen. I tend to think, he is looking for the right situation for him. And there have been other schools in the mix that either have a quarterback committed already or just, maybe a depth chart that's not ideal. And he has sort of kept those schools off his radar. And now that Ohio State has a quarterback in this class, I think he probably tends to look at his other options at this point. He's going to come out with a top 5 here soon. I would expect it this week probably, but it's coming soon. And, if I had to guess, I would say Ohio State will not be on it. But we'll see. Like I said, I think Ohio State would like to keep this thing going. I think they genuinely liked him at Friday Night Lights. I do think, obviously, some gamesmanship there with the offer. They wanted to get an answer from Mathis immediately. I think they wanted to come out of that official visit with Mathis with either a yes, I'm committed, or no, I'm sticking with Michigan State, and so that they could act accordingly or whatever. But there was some legitimacy there with that offer. I think they really liked what they saw, and he's a great kid. He's very impressive talking to him after the camp. I'm sure he impressed them too, just with meetings and one-on-ones and things like that. But yeah, I guess that was the very long way of saying I probably would say that at this point Maurer's out.
And I should probably clarify for those listening, in case you missed this among the absolute insane number of stories that Marc put out over the weekend, which, by the way, Marc, I'm not just saying this because you're my new teammate here. You did a fantastic job covering Friday Night Lights this weekend. Bang-up job. Here I was trying to prep for the show. I could not even keep up reading all of your work, and you were actually putting it out. So great job on that. But if you missed it, of course, Brian Maurer performing and camping at Friday Night Lights at Ohio State and picking up the offer Saturday morning. Of course, Maurer is a 6'2", 180 pro-style quarterback from Ocala, Florida. So I wanted to mention that in case somebody was wondering who Brian Maurer was. I don't think most of the people listening are wondering, but I did want to clarify on that. So let's, and I hate to linger on quarterbacks because, my goodness, we've had so much quarterback discussion between recruiting and the Dwayne Haskins, Joe Burrow stuff. But there is one more guy we got to talk about before we move on, and that's Jack Miller, 2020 class. Of course, the number 3 quarterback in that class from Scottsdale, Arizona. Is going to visit Alabama, was at Ohio State. Everybody comes away here this weekend thinking that after the Alabama visit, he's probably going to fall to Ohio State. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, for me, it's a matter of, does this happen Monday, Tuesday, or does it happen Thursday, Friday? I mean, anything more than a week here would shock me. But I think it's all but finished, and I think it's just a matter of, kind of crossing the T's and dotting the I's. The flight to Alabama was booked. Promises were made to Alabama's coaching staff, and I think now that that's been fulfilled, I think we are on full-on commitment watch here, pretty much any day.
So the question is, who are the receivers that Miller, Mathis, some of these guys might be throwing to in the future? Of course, we know Garrett Wilson is in the fold. Another guy that you've intimated on Buckeye Grove that, could be dropping for Ohio State, Marcus Washington of St. Louis Trinity Catholic, the number 10 wide receiver in the country in the 24/7 Sports Composite. Where do you think Washington is with Ohio State? They seem to be doing very well with him after this weekend.
Yeah, I think they are. I think they came into the weekend absolutely in the driver's seat. I think, I've heard nothing that would lead me to believe that the visit went sideways or anything this weekend. For me, again, we get down to this all the time in recruiting is timing, and when is a kid going to decide it's time? Marcus has a tentative date of August 7th. So I guess the question now is, as we gather more on Marcus here this week, does he stick with that, or do things get pushed up coming out of this visit? But I mean, if we're talking uncommitted guys right now, he's right at the top of my list of guys that I think are close to locks to go to Ohio State.
This is obviously a class where Ohio State is looking to take several wide receivers, as they're going to lose a lot after this season, so they're going to want to refill that depth. After Washington, of course, David Bell was here this weekend. You've talked about, I think timing is going to be another big thing with him. The longer it goes, probably the better it is for Ohio State. Elijah Higgins is out there. What are some of the receivers you think Ohio State would, if they had their choice, what receivers do you think Ohio State would like to take in this class?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mostly hit on the group there. I think Washington's probably the guy right now. From there, I think Jamison Williams, Elijah Higgins, David Bell, maybe a first-come, first-served situation. But, like I've said, I've said this on the site a bit recently. If I had to guess, I would say they end up with about 4 receivers in this class, but I'm not sure they're in a hurry to get to 4, if that makes sense. I think once they get to 3, that you could see the brakes get pumped a little bit, and now they take a little more time to evaluate some senior film, maybe chase a big fish or two that's still out there that, maybe we're not talking about right now. Gosh, Jaden Hazelwood. People are gonna ask about Jaden Hazelwood until he shows up at Georgia next year. But I think that's a pipe dream. But it gives them an avenue to sort of stay in the game with certain guys. John Dunmore out of Florida is one that I know they will certainly chase, and he's probably a winter decision as well, as David Bell. So. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's a 1, 2, 3 so much as it is we like all these guys, and it's a matter of, okay, first 2 get in the class, and then from there, things may slow down a little bit until they can sort everything out. But yeah, you definitely hit the names, and I think they did a good job with David Bell this weekend. It was interesting having him tell me a winter decision, because there's been so much speculation about a summer decision there. So, whether that's lip service or whether that's, throwing people off the trail, or even maybe in his heart he does think it's going to be in the winter, and then he, guys commit earlier than they say they do all the time. So, but if that happens, if Bell does wait until like November, December, that gives Ohio State 6 months to almost to play catch up here, because they did slip behind a little bit, and they've turned up the heat lately, and now they can get back into it. And I actually think that would benefit them. I think if he committed this week, it probably would not be Ohio State. But if you give them 6 months to make him a priority, I think that's a potential game changer.
Speaking of game changers, okay, so there's one more guy in 2019 class I want to ask you about, and then we'll get to a 2020 prospect before we wrap things up here. There's just so much we could talk about, and we could probably go on for hours, but I don't want to overwhelm people in episode number 1. So let's talk about Darnell Wright, who showed up to Ohio State this weekend. Big visitor, obviously, more ways than one. Physically, very big guy. But, the top offensive tackle in the country from Huntington, West Virginia. He's somebody that, I've been told repeatedly, very hard to get a read on, but him showing up at Ohio State can be construed as nothing but good news. What is his situation right now as you see it after he leaves Ohio State here this weekend?
Yeah, I've kind of been of the mindset that this one doesn't particularly matter until October, November. He's looking at a lot of different schools. He's looking at some SEC schools. Obviously, he's looking at Ohio State. He was at North Carolina this past week as well. He's a guy that I think a lot of people got a little overly optimistic about early on in terms of Ohio State's chances because he lives 2 hours away. It was convenient for him to get to Ohio State. Kind of some of the first visits he made, and as he's kind of broadened his horizons a little bit, visits Tennessee and Alabama, schools like that. People felt he's slipping away. And, again, I would take the field today over Ohio State, but I think there's a happy medium here to be found between Ohio State being the favorite and Ohio State being out of it. The truth is somewhere in the middle there. And, getting him back, it's encouraging. There's no question it's encouraging. You have a chance to host, the number 2 prospect in America or whatever. It's never a bad thing. But, he is tough to read, but I just think this comes down to official visits, and we revisit this in like October, November, and see where the landscape is. I think Alabama, Tennessee, Ohio State. I think those are 3, general mainstays, but I wasn't ready to jump off the bandwagon when he hadn't visited in a few months. I'm not ready to anoint him, in the class for Ohio State now. So he's going to be one of those interesting ones that, again, it comes down to those 5 officials, and you see it a lot with these top 10 overall players where they can't decide and all sorts. So he'll be a fun one to cover later this fall.
This was welcome news for a couple of my friends because I have a few friends that constantly were asking, do you have any idea what the latest is with Darnell Wright? And I'm just like, no, I really don't. It's just there was so long there for a period of time where we just didn't hear anything. So it was nice to see him pop up, for Ohio State, so we had something to talk about with him.
Sure.
So one last guy I wanted to touch base here, and then we'll wrap it up for today. Derek Wingo, you had a great story on his visit. The 2020 outside linebacker, number 3 in the country in the composite ratings, number 60 overall. Basically saying the Buckeyes lead after a 4-day visit. What did Derek Wingo see this weekend at Ohio State, and what impressed him?
Yeah, so he saw everything. He was here all week. He did all the academic stuff, meetings with the coaches, he camped, he hung out with players. Basically everything you can do on a visit because he was here for so long. He got the full Ohio State experience. Grew up an Ohio State fan down in Florida. Told me that a lot of his friends and their families were either from Ohio or just big Ohio State fans. So he kind of got brainwashed early, and was coming up here. Very serious trip. Very serious trip to come up here for 4 days. On Ohio State's end, I think because he's ranked very highly, and obviously that can't be ignored. But yet, for Ohio State's purposes, we are talking about someone who is still sort of learning the linebacker position. He's bounced around at different positions growing up. He, as most sophomores at Aquinas will find out, was not always on the field. So there are some things there that I think need to be put on tape this fall. Just given how early it is that Ohio State would like to see. But assuming he does what we think he can do, because we've watched him at camps all spring and summer, and he's been fantastic. assuming he, takes all these things onto the field this fall, puts out, a good junior film, I think that gets done. I think it gets done probably pretty. I think just about as soon as it can. I think as soon as there's a comfort level there with what he's accomplished on the field and what they've seen on tape, I think that's an immediate. I think that's a kid that they could almost call up and say, "We want you to commit," and he commits. I think it's that. Skewed towards Ohio State right now.
Marc Givler, you can catch him on Twitter at Marc Givler BG. That is Mark with a C, not with a K. Please do not spell it with a K. You are going to get the wrong person if that happens. Mark, recruiting extraordinaire for Buckeye Grove. It has been great to talk to you. This was a fantastic update, and hopefully the first of many tremendous segments we do here in the recruiting roundup for the Unscripted Ohio podcast. I appreciate you coming on and joining me from Atlanta. I know you're going to have a very busy week down there after a very busy weekend.
Yeah, it's gonna be a little nuts next week, but probably should stay on the site because I don't think Ohio State's finished.
Yep, I would definitely recommend people tune in. If it is anything like you have done this weekend, there's going to be a lot of great stuff coming. So, Mark, I appreciate all your hard work, and we will talk to you very soon, buddy.
Thanks, man.
Stretch runtime here at Unscripted Ohio. Kick up your feet as we cross the finish line with the Buckeye Beat, the latest in Ohio State news and notes.
Kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
Let's wrap things up now here on Unscripted Ohio with the Buckeye Beat, a little news and notes segment here that will end every podcast, or almost every podcast anyhow, with a couple of the issues of the day, the topics du jour, if you will, talking about the Ohio State Buckeyes and former players around the country, little things that are happening and going on around the community that maybe we won't talk about in the regular segment because there's just not a reason to go in depth about them. But I would like to mention the first topic I want to bring up here real quick. Sam Hubbard, not surprisingly, impressing the Cincinnati Bengals and head coach Marvin Lewis, as Lewis told reporters this past week that Hubbard is way ahead of the curve, saying that he's just wise beyond his years right now and super mature. Of course, that is not a surprise to Ohio State fans. I think anybody that has watched Sam Hubbard the past couple years, not surprised that he's catching on quickly with the Bengals, and it will not be a surprise if Sam Hubbard is, in fact, a instant impact player for the Cincinnati Bengals this upcoming season. Keita Bates-Diop, of course, taken in the second round of the NBA draft, the number 47 pick overall by the Minnesota Timberwolves. NBA.com having an article on Keita Bates-Diop falling that low and basically saying there's a good possibility that Keita may be, quote, the steal of the draft. Head coach Tom Thibodeau saying they were very excited to draft Keita Bates-Diop. He was impressive in their workouts. And, of course, he had a great junior season at Ohio State. They were surprised that he fell, but they were very, very happy to grab him with him still being on the board. I have some mixed takes about this from a standpoint that I can see to some degree why Keita fell so far. I was a little surprised at how far he fell. I actually thought he was going to be a second-round pick because there were some question marks about his explosiveness, whether he could create his own shot. And defensively, he's a great defensive player, but he's not going to wow you with lateral quickness. He's not going to stay in front of the most quick guards in the NBA on a consistent basis. Now, that being said, I don't think he's going to be a liability, and I don't think he's going to hold his own. But with those issues, I'm not really surprised he fell to a second-round pick. But look, when it comes to knowing the game and being talented, being skilled, Keita Bates-Diop, I think, is going to have a very good career. I think he will stick with Minnesota. I think he'll make the roster this year, and I actually think he's going to be part of the rotation and will have, I think, a 10-plus year career in the NBA. As one of those guys, maybe he's never a 20-point-a-game scorer, but I think he's a guy that you can count on being an NBA veteran and sticking around for a good 10 years, averaging 10 points a game. So good luck to Keita Bates-Diop, who I think is going to have a great career with the Timberwolves. And final note today of the Buckeye Beat, you may have seen rumors that Alonzo Gaffney, Ohio State commitment, who is now a top 25 consensus player in the 2020, no, I had that right the first time, 2019 recruiting class for the Buckeye basketball team. You may have seen the rumors that he may transfer from Garfield Heights. Of course, he had transferred to Garfield Heights before this year, so this would be his third high school in as many years. There are rumors he's going to be transferring to a prep school in Connecticut. I can tell you this, there are a lot of different reasons I've heard as to why Gaffney may leave. I don't think it's anything to worry about as it pertains to his Ohio State commitment. I think he is firmly committed to the Buckeyes. For what it's worth, he does have a Buckeye tattoo. I know that doesn't necessarily preclude somebody from flipping, but I do think this is more about his overall academic and athletic future. I think the prep school is going to better prepare him for Ohio State, and I think the scheduling and just the foundation and the discipline that a prep school provides may better prepare him for a possible professional future beyond Ohio State. I don't think this is anything to worry about as far as the Buckeyes are concerned. I don't even think this is a mark on Garfield Heights as a program or Sonny Johnson as a head coach. I just think this is a personal decision made by the Alonzo Gaffney family. I don't think this is anything to worry about. It is noteworthy, and I know some people saw this news and probably are worried about it. I don't think there's anything to worry about from what I understand. Now, there could be more to this that we haven't heard. If that happens, if more comes out about this, of course, we'll talk about it. But for right now, I think Alonzo Gaffney will be a Buckeye. Now it's a matter of finding him some more running mates. Of course, C.J. Walker, transfer from Florida State, is already committed to that class as a transfer, and now they're looking for a point guard and one more wing to join him, or one more big. There are some guys out there, E.J. Liddell, another wing forward they're really interested in, DJ Carton, a point guard they're going all in about. He's a top 50 point guard. There are some names out there that I think they would love to have. We'll see how this class progresses, but I do believe Gaffney will still be a Buckeye, and I think they will get him some running mates for a fantastic 2019 recruiting class. Anyhow, that is going to do it today for the Unscripted Ohio podcast. Truly appreciate everybody making us a part of your Monday. This will be a regular Monday thing. We will be back next Monday and the Monday after. Eventually, we are going to expand to a Friday show. Probably in the next couple of weeks, we'll start doing Friday episodes as well. And we hope to add additional episodes throughout the week as we go on and as this is successful and continues to grow. So for right now, it'll be a Monday thing for right now. Friday's coming here very soon, and then we will look at the possibility of expanding to 3 to 5 episodes in the future. But we will be back next Monday for sure. I hope to have some basketball recruiting talk in the coming weeks. We're going to get Corey Evans of Rivals on, hopefully next week, if not maybe the week after, but we'll see how that goes. And we've got some other guests that I'm going to work on in the coming weeks. So very excited. Thank you for taking a listen today, and I hope you'll join me again next week as we'll be back with more Unscripted Ohio. In the meantime, you can catch me on Twitter at KYLam, the number 8. Hit me with your questions, comments, suggestions for the show. Be glad to hear it. You can also email me, Kyle@BuckeyeGrove.com, and catch all the work that Mark and Kevin and myself and the entire staff, Nevada Buck on the message boards, everybody doing a great job on BuckeyeGrove.com. Feel free to check us out. Thanks for giving me a listen. We'll be back next Monday, everybody. Go Bucks.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.